Could Virginia be the key swing state that sends Trump to the White House? Welcome back to Ponder Policy, and today we're talking about a relatively new swing state that has become very narrow in recent polls. Now, in front of us is a map of the 6 widely accepted swing states for the 2024 presidential contest between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And if you were to add a 7th to this map, a lot of people would say North Carolina because it was relatively close in the 2020 presidential election. Well, new polls have shown that Virginia, as a race, has actually narrowed up by a large margin, and this state went for Biden by over 10 points just 4 years ago. And right now in the two most recent polls by Fox News and Roanoke College, the race is tied within the state. If you look at Virginia polls going to a bigger picture, older polls maybe in early May, late April, and going before that had Biden with a slight edge. And now the two most recent polls in head-to-head contests show Trump and Biden even. And when you include third parties, Biden only has a very narrow edge within the state. Now, if this were to be a swing state in the 2024 election, this could change everything, especially for Trump's victory path. Now, how could Trump win this state? Now, that's kind of interesting because in 2021, Republicans enjoyed their first statewide victory in actually quite some time when Glenn Youngkin and actually Republicans all down the ticket in the statewide races won their contests in a off-cycle election, or off-year election, where they ran up the numbers throughout Virginia, which has been traditionally Democratic for so long that it almost came as a shock, but he was predicted to win, and with Trump's last-second endorsement to get turnout up in the west of the state, sort of the more Appalachian area, a perfect coalition, a perfect storm for Republicans brewed within the state, and Republicans were able to enjoy their first victory in actually quite a long time. So let's look at Glenn Youngkin's coalition, what he did to win, and sort of how Trump can either replicate or win the state if he were to be able to win it. So what Youngkin did was, with Trump's endorsement and sort of the more populist coalition, he got much higher turnout in these western counties of Virginia that had largely given up on Republican politics within the state for a long time. And actually, the night before on the election on Fox News, Trump endorsed Youngkin and told his base to turn out as much as they can in these counties. So even though these counties are low population, getting 200, 1,000, 2,000 extra votes in these counties was really what sent Youngkin over the finish line to a large regard, because he only won by about 2 percentage points. And just like these votes in these rural western counties really helped Youngkin to achieve victory in the state. Now, going to a turnout map of that election, you can see, I think the light green is 30 to 40%, going 40 to 50, 50 to 60% turnout. So there's still votes to be had in this region come 2024. It's not like all voters came out to vote. And yes, some of these would be Democratic votes. A lot of these would be Republican votes, especially in the west of the state. But there are still many more votes to be had. And if Trump were to win that demographic, if higher turnout in the west of the state, that could be enough to, even if he loses some support elsewhere, do very well within the state. Now, if we look at how Youngkin won, that was a large factor. He also did very well in the Virginia Beach area, which is more establishment, has been winnable for Republicans, as shown by this election. But this coastal area, Youngkin, won for the first time in a long time. These counties went for Obama over McCain and Romney, and they went for Bush back in the day. So, this was kind of a dramatic flip that these more suburban, coastal, slightly more touristy areas, which do have a lot of voters, was able to go to Youngkin. And yes, it wasn't by huge margins, but going from, Obama plus 10 or 15 or 20 in some of these counties to the margins that Youngkin narrowed it down to. I mean, even in Virginia Beach City, Youngkin actually won, and this area definitely helped Youngkin to push across the finish line. Even further into the Bay Area, the Surrey County, and sort of like Prince George's, but like these counties are Republican for the first time in a long time, and that sort of the message that Youngkin had, which I think Trump can play on, was a lot of parental choice in education, make homeschooling available. That's more of a Trump issue. Youngkin didn't really campaign on that, but it would play well to that audience. Certainly, a lot more just suburban, like issues that have actually won over suburban voters. And the other area where that might play well, I don't quite know how to pronounce this county, but this county had been more solidly Democratic. I mean, this is outer DC suburbs that went sort of 2-1 Republican, and that margin just, did so well for Youngkin in the race that the DC suburbs, the suburb area, when he campaigned on schooling issues, when he campaigned on health issues, like being able to choose your healthcare provider, and especially cost of living issues where middle-class families aren't exactly enjoying the same quality of life, standard of living than they were even 10, 20 years ago. Because property taxes, especially in the DC suburbs, very high. Inflation, especially over the past 4 years, you saw that coming right out of COVID, that part of what contributed to Youngkin's success was the beginnings of that like high 9% inflation rate. And he actually did very well in the more inner DC suburbs. These are two counties which Trump in 2020 got smashed in, Prince William and Loudoun County. And Youngkin was able to make these much more competitive and run up the votes there. And yes, he didn't win these counties, but in terms of contributing to his overall statewide vote share, it definitely did help a lot. Now, is Trump going to be able to tap into the same audience? I think he's going to underperform Youngkin in these areas, but he can make up votes elsewhere. And I'm going to get into sort of the messaging that's going to be able to do that for him. But if he can, not get slammed in Loudoun County, Prince William County, and just maintain, low double-digit margins in these counties, he should be able to actually make the state very competitive. But it's also Trump, and he's also populist and anti-establishment, and those are messages that across Virginia don't work as well for voters. So the demographics, the voting demographics that Trump might have to tap into in order to make the state competitive might be different. And I think I think the first piece of that is Trump's new-grown support among minority communities, especially Black and Hispanic communities, which is a large voting bloc in the Alexandria area, the D.C. suburbs, and the Richmond area. If we go to an ethnic map of Virginia, the D.C. suburban area, the greater D.C. metropolitan area, the Richmond metro area, even down in Virginia Beach, you have a lot of minority voters where Trump's margins for those demographics have drastically improved over just the last 4 years, and he could outperform Youngkin in those demographics. So even if he loses some white suburban voters, he can gain in those inner city voters, the voters who are upset over inflation and the cost of living, the cost of gas, which are all key issues that Trump has been outperforming Biden on nationally. And I think that would be a key step in winning the state. He would have to get turnout up among all those groups, which is harder in the rural county other than just his message saying, we're making a play for Virginia. He's already said that. And it's a presidential election year, so turnout will be higher. He would have to go into the belly of the beast, hold maybe a rally in Alexandria or near D.C., in D.C., and probably down in Virginia Beach, too. Those would be two great places to hold rallies in. Richmond. Roanoke is kind of out in like a little blue island in the middle of a Red Sea. and probably wouldn't be same with Charlottesville. Just probably also Charlottesville, just the optics of what happened in 2015 probably wouldn't be the best place to hold a rally. But going to the belly of the beast actually wouldn't be like Trump's Bronx rally, just getting that minority support from voters, getting voters energized to go and turn out on election day. But holding rallies in either D.C. or Alexandria, Richmond, and Virginia Beach would all be incredible for Trump's election strategy within the state. The other key factor, I think that Virginia might be one of the few states where the vice presidential pick actually matters in a sense, where the more populist candidates for his VP don't really play as well within the state. But if he were to choose a Ellie Stefanik, which he's considering, I don't think he would choose Haley, but Haley would do well, would actually give him a boost in the state. And I think the best choice nationally, but also would probably help him with a lot of Hispanics in the D.C. suburb area, or the D.C. Metropolitan area, would be Marco Rubio, which is one of his vice presidential candidate picks. And people are going to argue that vice presidential picks don't matter all that much, and they don't. But I think giving that sort of tempering vice president, and almost like Mike Pence did in 2016, although not too, more good for the cameras, good at debating, calms the fears of this populist takeover. But I think a vice presidential candidate like that could actually help Trump a lot in Virginia when you have a lot of these more establishment Republican voters. The other key messaging thing is if you look at polls, Kennedy actually polls slightly more from Trump within the state. And these polls do not include Chase Oliver, which is the new Libertarian Party nominee, he's far more left-leaning. And I think he might actually help by splitting a lot of that Kennedy vote away from him. Because I think libertarians are forced to choose, where more right-leaning libertarians flock to Trump, and some went to Kennedy, and some are going to stick with Chase Oliver. But I think some of that Kennedy vote is artificially inflated in these polls. So I think vice presidential pick, I think holding rallies in key locations and energizing sort of that inner city minority groups to turn out and vote on election day, getting the vote out in these western counties where he can rack up some statewide votes, even if they're smaller counties population-wise. I think all of those can do great, and campaigning on sort of these economic and suburban issues can definitely help Trump within the state of Virginia. Now, if we hop over to look at what flipping Virginia can do for Trump's electoral map, he could win the state by over a point. It's, Youngkin won by 2, and even with a slightly different coalition, he could win by 2. He could win by more. Is likely to underperform Youngkin, but it's not impossible. And having Virginia as a flip does crazy things for Trump electorally, because it's a net 26 electoral vote from Biden to Trump. State flip, meaning that it's worth more than any of these other swing states, net, because this would be an otherwise pretty safe Biden state. If he wins Virginia, very likely to win North Carolina, if not by lean, then by likely margins. We're talking 4 or 5 percentage points. And part of that is because you have that Virginia Beach crowd, which does attract North Carolina voters who might be energized to vote. The similar messaging, the states are actually quite similar demographically. But what's interesting about this map is that the 2 swing states that Trump is doing best in the polls, Georgia and Nevada, I think these margins will be tighter. Just by winning those 2, Trump has already won the presidency. Just by getting Georgia and Nevada, I mean, that's the extra 22 electoral votes that he needs to get 270. And yes, this would be a tight race, but he's currently doing very well in the polls in both of these states. But you don't even necessarily need those 2 states. There's a lot of different electoral options. Even if Biden were to get all of these other states, if Trump gets Virginia, he has a lot of electoral leeway. Say he doesn't get Georgia or Arizona, he could get 2 states in the Rust Belt and that would do it. He could get Pennsylvania and Nevada. He could get Arizona, Nevada, and Wisconsin, which he's performing well in all three of those. The same messaging that's going to apply to Virginia is going to also help Trump in a lot of these other states. I'm not saying this messaging I think would apply very well for another state that Trump has targeted, but I don't see him doing well in. But because there's a more competitive Senate race, there's a lot of energy for Republicans within the state. I think New Jersey can narrow down. This could even be, 5 to 7 points. It could even be tighter if things change. But I think the same message that appeals to Virginia voters definitely would do well in New Jersey. Same with Minnesota, especially attacking RFK and those suburban issues, the minority community issues, cost of livings, all of those would perform well. Like all of those platform issues would perform very well in Minnesota. But that being said, just appealing to Virginia voters, like making a play for the state, making the Biden campaign spend money in Virginia, which they had locked down 4 years ago. After, if it was one poll that showed even race, you don't think much of it because it's just tossed into the polling aggregate, and it's a one-off. It doesn't really. But now we have two polls that show dead heat when it's head-to-head. You have much closer than comfort when you include Kennedy, and this doesn't. Like I said, these don't even include Chase Oliver. So I think there is a blueprint that Youngkin laid out 3 years ago for how you can turn Virginia red. He laid out the key issues you need to hit on, the kind of candidate you need to paint your opponent as. And I think Trump might not be able to tap into those same demographics, but he has others that he's outperforming Youngkin in. Between his base, which is going to be more energized than ever in the west of the state to vote for him, to turn out, when you have such low turnouts even in the west after Trump said, I need my base to turn out. Even then, you have 40-50% turnout. And those margins would only help Trump if you get higher turnout. When you have Virginia Beach, which could go back Republican for the first time presidentially since Bush was running, Bush W. And when you have Trump, who might underperform Youngkin in the outer suburbs of D.C. and Alexandria, he's probably going to, but he's going to capture much more, especially if there's decent enough turnout for those key groups, if he does rallies here, in the D.C. metro area, in Richmond, in Virginia Beach, for minority communities, which have shifted, 10, 12, 15 points in favor of Republicans over the past 4 years alone. If you attack Kennedy within the state, I think you can have a map where Virginia flips, and people would think you're crazy if you said that that's a possibility for the election map after 2020. This was a double-digit victory for Biden, and now it's currently looking closer than Minnesota. It's currently looking closer than New Hampshire. It's looking closer than North Carolina. And it's a swing state now. That's just hard to believe given our current electoral understanding. Virginia voter demographics don't swing that, no state's voter demographics swing by 10 points in 4 years. And yet it seemingly happened. And like I said, even if Trump loses the state, he has plenty of ways to get to 270, but it also makes the Biden campaign play defense. It makes them spend money in a place where they did very well 4 years ago. It takes away a place where they, don't have to worry about it. It's in yet another state. It's a lot of electoral votes that they have to pay attention to. And this could be, not California, but this could be a very easy pathway for Trump. If he wins Virginia, he's likely to win more than these states. But if Virginia's this close in polls recently, I'd like to see more polls like this in order to sort of further boost my thoughts on the state. It is still only 2 polls, but it's the two only recent polls, and they both show the same thing. It's a dead heat. So we have a new swing state, and this could be Trump's miracle on the Potomac. So leave a like on the video. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching.